both of my parents died in a car accident. And in a moment, my world flips upside down, right? And, 20 is a really interesting age because I was old enough. I was at college. I was able to take care of myself day to day. But I was young enough to not really know how the world worked or my role in it.
Hello, everyone. This is Kathy Caprino, and welcome to my podcast, Finding Brave. I've created this show for everyone who longs to create something bold and brave in their life, to rise up, speak up, and stand up for who they are, and to reach their highest and biggest visions. Each week, I'll be speaking with inspiring guests from all walks of business, leadership, entertainment, the creative arts, and the entrepreneurial world. And they'll be sharing their intimate stories of finding brave and offer their best strategies for building your most rewarding, joyful, and meaningful life, business, and career. Hey friends, Kathy here, and I am over the moon to announce the release of my new Kathy Caprino AI career and leadership coaching clone. Powered by Delphi AI, this tool brings my career growth teachings, advice, and answers to your most pressing questions directly to you 24/7. With a subscription, you get unlimited access and can message or audio chat with my clone anytime you need guidance. Drawing on my 40 plus years of experience from corporate life, therapy, coaching, to writing and speaking across 6 continents, I've trained Kathy AI using over 2.5 million words of my content, including articles, books, podcasts, interviews, and workshops seen over 41 million times. My mission? To make Kathy Caprino AI your trusted resource for real-time career leadership and personal growth strategies. Get tailored answers to your toughest career challenges and practical solutions to achieve your top goals. We offer 2 affordable pricing tiers, with Tier 2 unlocking great bonuses like membership to my new Career Breakthrough community, including free coaching calls with me, exclusive discounts on my courses and programs, free LinkedIn support, and so much more. It also makes a fantastic gift for family, friends, and colleagues who want to thrive professionally. Check it out and subscribe today at kathycaprino.com/KathyAI. Let me know what you think, and I truly hope it becomes a game changer for you. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Finding Brave. How are you this week? It is, when this is coming to you, it's mid-September. I hope September's starting off with a bang. I happen to love September. It's so great, the new season. And I am beyond excited to welcome our beautiful, brilliant guest today about a topic that is so critical. And as every day goes on, we see how more critical it is. So April, Rinne, thank you for taking the time in the middle of your book launch, which is smashingly successful. Thank you for being here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathy. I am just thrilled to be here as well.
We were both laughing about the technological issues of pulling interviews and podcasts together, from the lighting to you're seeing the beautiful light streaming in here. What the heck, people? We're just letting it flow the way it needs to. So if you have a fire alarm, April, like you did the other day, we'll forgive you, and you guys will forgive me for anything that goes on here. All right, people, we are talking about today using a flux mindset to better navigate the future. And April is absolutely the expert on this in your own life, and how you turned what you've learned in your own life into messages for, well, you'll find out. Let me tell you about April. Ranked one of the world's 50 leading female futurists by Forbes, April Rinne is a change navigator. She helps individuals and organizations rethink and reshape their relationship with change, uncertainty, and a world in flux. My goodness. I mean, what else can we say? We're in such that world today, right? A World Economic Forum young global leader. She is a trusted advisor to organizations ranging from Airbnb, Nike, Intuit, the World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, NESTA. I don't even know how to pronounce this. Is it Trōv? I'm not even going to say the rest of these. I can't. They're all over the world. And Unsettled, as well as governments spanning Singapore to South Africa, Canada to Colombia, Italy to India. April is the author of the new book, Flux, 8 Superpowers for Thriving in Constant Change, which came out August 24th. There is so much more about April, but I'm going to read this because I find this fascinating. A graduate of Harvard Law School, April is a futurist, advisor, global development executive, microfinance lawyer, investor, a mental health advocate, certified yoga teacher, globetrotter, 100 plus countries. It goes on. But I want you to know she also harnesses her very personal experiences with Flux. And you're going to tell us about that. Mm-hmm. But, first of all, I feel like, what am I doing with my life? How do you have all these incredible professional accomplishments? It's so inspiring. But I do want to start with what you've written about the Flux mindset. We can see it behind you. And can you tell us, I'm spilling the beans here, but I have such a personal affinity with people who turn their mess into a message. Not that you ever had a mess, but people who've turned what they've been through in life that other people would say, I don't understand how you survived that, and then bring all that learning forward to help others. I find that so inspirational. So could we start there, April? Tell us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. What a beautiful and generous opening. I'm just like so excited.
I am too.
So yeah, this whole concept of flux and a world in flux, I do always like to remind people that, yes, I think 2020 and the COVID pandemic, and, I tell people, like, is your world in flux? So like, that's my life. It's a moment in time for us that we're all grappling with. But the message I bring is not one about 2020 per se, or a pandemic per se. It's about the fact that moving forward, we actually are facing a future with more uncertainty, more change, more flux, and that I didn't write the book about 2020 either. I've been working on it I've been writing it for about 3 years, but It's really more like 3 decades in the making. Wow. So if we go back to that kind of origin story or the genesis of flux.
And before you do that, can you define flux for us, since that's what we're going to be saying? 5,000.
Sure. So I love this because flux is both a noun and a verb.
Oh, wow.
And a lot of people, they like to say, it's a fun word to say, right?
Yeah.
You can riff on it.
I'm in flux.
But exactly. So as a noun, which is how most people know it, it means constant change or movement or fluctuation. But the world is in flux, constant change, not one change that you react or respond to, but like never ending change. But also as a verb, the verb to flux means to learn to become fluid. And I love this concept because the world is in flux and we all need to learn how to flux, to change and shift and strengthen our mindsets to be fit for a future in flux, full of uncertainty, etc. So it's fun because, again, lots of riffs on it.
I love it. Let me just ask this, and then we've got to get to the origin story. Do you feel, has the world always been in flux? And we just didn't know it because my kids who are 24 and 27, they're saying, my daughter in particular, it's a tough time in so many ways right now. And they said to me, has it always been like that? And I think it always has. It's just that we are now bombarded with a billion bytes of information per second of, photos and images. Tell me what you think. Has the world been in flux?
Yeah. So on the one hand, change has been around for all of human history. I like to say, like, the only reason you and I are here is because of change.
Right. Right.
Some things changed and we came into being.
Right.
But at the same time, it's not just how many things are changing. And there's a separate conversation we could have about the role of technology and how technology tends to accelerate how much is changing, but not just how much is changing on any given day, which includes how much information people expect us to be able to consume, digest, distill, and do something about. But it's also the pace of change. And the way that I like to put it, and I think your kids would probably resonate with this, the pace of change has never been faster than it is today. But here's the hook. It is likely to never again be this slow.
Oh, good grief.
When you think about that, I mean, because if you look back all the way, industrial revolution, so to
Right.
speak, right? The first industrial revolution, it took about 100 years for the effects of it to be fully felt. Now, that was a lot of change compressed in, but it was compressed into effectively 5 generations, given lifetimes at that time. Today, we're in the so-called 4th industrial revolution, big picture.
Wow.
And no one knows exactly how long it's going to take, but, the bets are pretty good. It's between 10 and 20 years in which we see, and again, this is everything from smartphones, artificial intelligence, all of this is happening in basically less than 1 generation. And the human mind isn't really designed to cope like that. So part of me, and this is where I bring in the futurist lens, the global lens, where I'm sort of saying, hold on, there's a kind of inner reset that needs to happen individually, also though organizationally and societally, because if the pace of change is ever faster, and we already feel like we don't have enough time to keep up, we're overwhelmed, we're not able to show up fully, then we need a big reset, because the future does not play out well if we continue to buy into not just what society says, but what this pace of change is doing.
While you're talking, I'm getting choked up. And whenever that happens, it means I'm living what the very message that you're saying. So I just want to say this, as someone who has a small business, and let's face it, I mean, I don't BS on my shows here. I want to remain relevant. And it's amazing what being relevant and useful and reaching a lot of people requires today. Like I'm about to get on, or by the time you see this, people, I'm going to be on TikTok giving sound bites. Yikes. At a time where slowing down may seem really interesting for me, because I'm in that stage of life, having worked more than 40 years, it's not slowing down at all. It's speeding up. So all I want to tell you why I'm saying this is it really speaks to my heart, what you're saying, that I think if we don't take a conscious approach to change, we're going to just, it's going to exhaust us, and our mental health is going to go down the toilet. But anyway, we'll talk about that in a minute. Tell us how, do you have a follow-up on that comment?
Sure. Well, just going to say, and we'll circle back to this with the run slower, but as I like to say, I mean, you are providing such gifts, such service, such benefit to humanity.
Oh.
But in order to keep doing that and to do so in the ways that you're best at, you can't, and this isn't you per se, I mean, this is everyone in their own way, can't keep running ever faster. And what we find, and again, we'll circle back to this. So the superpowers are counterintuitive in these wonderful, wonderful ways, because they go against what society tells us, but they're actually not just much more fit for a world in flux, but much more suited to help you show up fully in the world. And it's not just about doing more. It's about being very selective about what you're doing and doing that full throttle. But, anyway. Yeah.
Love it.
Let's
all right. Now start from the beginning. Give me that origin story.
Yeah. And we've already teed it up quite nicely, because as I like to say, there are kind of 3 main lenses that I bring to change, right? The first and most recent one is that of a futurist, helping figure out where are we heading. The next one is this global lens, given my travels and work and living in many different places, and how much we can learn from different people around the world about how we think about and relate to change. But then if I go back deeper in my history, and like, when did my journey to flux begin? And if I peel back the layers of the onion of my interest around how do we deal with change? And also, I think maybe relevant in particular for this audience, like, what do you do when you don't know what to do? Oh. And you have that sense of like, I know there's something better, something different. That for me, my entry into flux happened almost 30 years ago. When I was in college, and both of my parents died in a car accident. And in a moment, my world flips upside down, right? And, 20 is a really interesting age, because I was old enough, I was at college, I was able to take care of myself day to day, but I was young enough to not really know how the world worked or my role in it. And so, this was, how do I rebuild my family? How do I take care of myself, right? I had to grow up really fast. What does this mean for my career? Because I really didn't have a template for that.
Wow.
And at that time, it's funny. I mean, I can now say, and many years later, the questions I started asking, which I think are so germane to your mission as well, which I love, and makes me so happy to be here. This sense of, what really matters? And if I were to die tomorrow, because I've just learned firsthand how fragile and unexpected life is, what would the world need me to do today? And
What
it
would the
led
world need
yeah,
me
not
to
me, not
do?
it, there. That's important. It wasn't about, this is about me. This is like, what do I need? If I were to die tomorrow, what should I do today? What does society think I need to do today? There was it was all about service to others. It was like, what does the world need?
You went to that immediately? I mean,
Well,
after grieving, of course.
yeah,
And I'm so
it was
sorry.
alongside. There was an enormous amount of the trauma and the mental health and the anxiety and the grief and all of that, which candidly took years to unpack. And in fairness, as you know, like, it doesn't ever stop.
No,
It's a
it
lifetime.
continues to,
But
right.
yeah, but you work your way through that. You walk through that initial fire, and then you get to the other side going, okay, life is forever changed, but how do I make sense of what's happened? How do I, take a mess and make it a message? It was very messy back then.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I like to think of it too as, how did I look at a challenge and turn it into just an enormous, enormous opportunity for growth?
Can I ask you this? I can't lobotomize the part of myself that was a therapist. I was a therapist. How do I ask this? What do you think contributed to, I mean, that's a selfless thought. Although there's selfishness in the most beautiful way in serving. When you serve others, you get so much. But I mean, I talk to a lot of people, April, and a lot of illustrious people, and a lot of them are not asking that question in that way. What does the world need me to do? Were you raised in a spiritual? Yeah. Was it spiritual?
So this does go back, and it brings me great joy, because I know I always joke, sort of, when I talk about my parents, it's sort of like I'm dropping a hand grenade into the conversation, right? Of like, oh, now what do we do? And I'm like, no. It is such a joy for me to talk about this, because I'm able to learn and better understand myself, but also how this message, it's my experience, but so many people in the world are trying to unpack their own puzzle of life. So in my case, I can say I'm very, very lucky. My childhood was not easy, but it was, as I like to say, I think all parents fall into this category. Like, my parents did the best they could with what they had, which wasn't a lot, and it wasn't a guidebook to parenting, but my dad was my best friend. I can be really candid with this as well. It's in the book and everything. My mom suffered from depression. We now know that she was borderline bipolar.
Wow.
My mom suffered a lot. My mom did the best she could.
Wow.
My dad was my best friend. Both my parents were teachers. And so education was a huge piece of our family. And we didn't have a lot in terms of money or material things, but the two things we were allowed to spend money on were education and travel. Wow. And my dad was a cultural geographer, meaning he studied the migratory patterns of people and plants and animals, and like, what makes the world diverse.
That's what he taught, and for a living,
which was very cool. Yeah. Oh. Didn't make a lot of money doing it, but loved it.
Who cares?
It was fabulous as a kid. No, that's what I mean. It was like worth it. Like, I'm so grateful, because he's who taught me everything from that. The more different someone is from you, the more interesting they are to get to know.
And the more you can learn, right?
Why do you want to hang out with people who look like you and talk like, he's like, the world is a big, beautiful place. Like, go out and explore it. But another thing that he would teach me, and where this question, the way I frame the question, comes from, is that he would remind me pretty much every day that as a girl, the fact that I got to go to school as a girl in the world made me so lucky. There was a very clear sense that the world was full of inequalities, full of systemic inequities, and that I was lucky, to be a girl, getting to go to school, getting an education, celebrate that. And he celebrated it every day. But what he said to me was, and both my parents, in fairness, said this, but my dad was the one that we had these conversations almost daily. He was like, because you've been so lucky to get to go to school, you have a duty, a kind of responsibility to give back. Now, he would say, there are lots of ways you can give back. You can be a doctor, you can be a teacher, you can be an environmentalist. Like, we're not going to tell you what you have to do, but you can never think that your career is about you. You have to think about how you can serve others. Now, I bring this up because I was like 6, 7, 8 years old hearing this.
He would be talking about that then?
Yeah. Oh yeah. We had some, I mean, in high school as well, but I remember it really, really young. And I thought that's what all kids were taught, right?
Oh, wow.
It wasn't until much later that I realized, whoa, that was kind of an interesting perspective. But I bring that up because even losing my parents, and one of the things I bring up in Flux too, is like, what makes you you even when everything else changes? Like, what are those values that you have instilled in you that you do believe make you who you are, authentic, unique, etc. And that sense of service, it was never a question for me. Because what I had learned also, he also taught me early on that when you give to people, when you serve others, you get so much back. And this might sound a little selfish too, right? But that sense of when I am of service to others, I don't think I've ever felt more alive or ever more capable.
I totally agree. And having lived a life, you didn't have to experience this, thank goodness, but I had 18 years in corporate life of the opposite of that. So lost, sick, chronic illness, sexual harassment. What am I doing? What is this? So meaningless, but doing what I thought society wanted of me, you know? Oh, good. But there was a piece that I wanted to be a strong woman, you know?
Yeah.
I wanted to be a role model for other women. Ha! I mean, no, I wasn't. I was following whatever, who cares? But the point is, I know what it is to live the opposite of what you just described. And it's hell. It's a living hell. Yeah. So people, I hope if any of this resonates, either side of the coin, you will do something here. What do you think, April?
Yeah. And if I can pick up on this, so back, and you are, I actually think your ability to serve now and in many other ways throughout your life, but having that experience brings power, a power that sort of been there, done that, walked that talk, and now can really talk with authority about what that whole spectrum looks like, right? Now, in my case, what's interesting, back to the age of 20, so I start asking these questions, and I can actually say now, I mean, I would never have imagined back then that I would write a book about change, nor would I have imagined that today I would look back on that time and go like, wow, what I actually went through. The way I like to frame it sometimes is that I experienced, not knowingly, not consenting, so to speak, but I had the equivalent of like a midlife crisis when I was 20.
Wow. Because without the benefit of the age and wisdom, really.
Right. But the questions I was asking were very similar to the kinds of questions that I hear people who are having some kind of crisis, big transition later in life. But here's the hook. I hadn't yet started my career. So I was looking around going like, okay, clearly I have to have a career was always important to me. I had to take care of myself. That was very clear. Like I didn't have a backstop. I needed to come up with a career of meaning, be self-sufficient, you know, all of that. But I was looking around going, okay, if I were to die tomorrow, what would the world need me to do? And it was interesting because right after graduation as well, where I had mentors and professors and, you know, folks saying that, you know, with your credentials, you should go work at a consulting firm or an investment bank. And I have immense respect for consulting firms and investment banks. Do not get me wrong, please. But I was looking at this going, wait, I'm going to die tomorrow. I think, and I did have this rational, totally irrational fear for many years that I didn't have long to live, sure, which makes sense when you realize what I've gone through. But I had this whole like, that is not what I need to do. Like, no. And I had this almost allergic reaction to following the straight path that society had set out for me. Wow. And so society said go left. I was going right, or, you know, go right. And I was going left. I was just veering. But I had this sense, and I had people throughout my life say to me, your resume makes no sense. You look like you're escaping something. What are you going to do? And I was like, I don't know exactly how all of these pieces fit together, but I do know that there is a different way of creating my career, a different way of adding value. And I was always interested not in specific disciplines, like being a lawyer or a doctor. I was interested in what was in between. I was interested in the interdisciplinary. Well, what if I took a law degree and then went in all these other places and applied those skills in ways that are novel, unique, that serve in new ways? And that ended up serving me really well. Although I would say it took me a bit longer than my peers that, you know, climbed straight up the corporate ladder. But then what I found is many of them, not that far after, were quite miserable. They wanted off the ladder. The ladder wasn't working for them. So when I look back now and kind of try to make sense of what I was experiencing then and the perspective I have now, I see that I kind of had the equivalent of a midlife crisis when I was 20.
Wow.
Now, I never would have called it that back then, nor would I have ever imagined that I'd write a book about change. But the questions I started asking at 20 are the kinds of questions that I see people who are going through some kind of transition, crisis, perhaps a really difficult time later in life.
Yeah.
And the fact that I did that when I was 20 was really interesting because I didn't have a career at that point in time.
Wow.
So I knew I needed one because all of a sudden I was self-sufficient. I had to take care of myself. I really needed to figure things out. But I also had this sense of, as I was saying, like, if I were to die tomorrow, because I now see how easily that could happen, even though I hope it doesn't, what would the world need me to do today? It was interesting because at the time I had mentors and professors telling me to, with my credentials, I should go work at an investment bank or a consulting company. And again, with all due respect to investment banks and consulting firms, I'm looking at this going like, wait a minute, I might die tomorrow. That is not what I need to do. That is not what the world needs me to do, right? The world needs me to go and figure out how I can serve others in new ways. It needs me to go and better understand how cultures actually relate to one another, tolerance, diversity, meaning, impact, sustainability, all these different things. And so what that meant was that I pursued very atypical things for a 20-something. Society was saying, turn right. I was like, nope, I'm going to turn left. And again, it was saying, turn right. I was going to turn left. So instead of working, for example, at a Wall Street firm, I guided and led hiking and biking trips around the world. I worked in Patagonia and in Vietnam and in Italy, and like, okay, now I was earning much less money. I was earning enough to care for myself, not enough to pay a mortgage or raise a family, but I was seeing the world and better understanding how it worked and how I fit into it. And that in turn exposed me to a lot of the different inequalities and inequities. And, alongside that, I did figure out, okay, I'm really interested in how empowering a law degree can be, but not to go and necessarily litigate or spend time in courtrooms. I actually had to do that as part of my parents' death, and taught me I never wanted to be near a courtroom because it was a car accident and you have to have these things by law. But that I was interested in a law degree is really empowering for other people. How can I actually apply the law to different sectors in different ways? How can I, take one way of seeing the world and leverage it into other places that haven't seen that perspective before? And so it led me down a very interesting career path that, in fairness, took me longer, right? I mean, my friends who wanted to climb the corporate ladder and pursue the straight line, they did so well, but I found that most of them pretty quickly were unhappy, even miserable. And so I share this because I like to say I have built more of what is called a portfolio career than a career path, which shows up in the book and we can talk more about. But I realize now that I long ago wanted that, but it didn't have a name. And that now there are so many different ways everyone can think about and build and curate their career. And so I want to bring that to others.
Well, I so love it. And I want to amplify two things that I really have to talk about Flux Mindset in your book. In a way, I mean, not in any way to diminish what you went through, losing your parents, but there was a freedom and an urgency to choose who you were going to be in the world and not let anything stop you. And, people, if there's any message here that I would hope you would get is, no matter what our life situation, we can begin doing that now. I don't care if you're 61, 40, 20, ask these questions. And yes, there's a lot of unpacking of a lot of pressure that we get from our parents and our families and society. But look, you did it and we can do it. You're everything that you are.
Yeah. And Kathy,
that's why you're so successful and joyful in your work, I think, April. Yeah.
Well, and when you lose something, when you go through difficulty, how much more grateful that makes you feel for what you've got, as well as you start realizing, wow, there is abundance all around us. I just didn't see it before. There are things I can do all around me. I didn't see it before because, again, I think, and I'm a little bit biased here, but I think society puts a lot of blinders on what we're supposed to do and not supposed to do it, etc.
And that's a segue. Can we talk about, you talk about seeing what is invisible.
Yeah.
And can you, so let's walk us through your book, in 15 minutes. We are missing so much. Why is that happening? Why, and why do we have to see what is invisible, make visible the invisible? Tell us.
So see what's invisible is one of the 8 Flux superpowers. And it is this sense of, I suppose more broadly, just a quick backdrop. Every single one of us on the planet has what I call a script. And our script, these are the norms and narratives and stories that we're told as we grow up, as we enter the world, about the world we're expected to live in and our role in it. And so you have a script and I have a script and everyone has a script and everyone's script is different. And I'm not going to say that anyone's script is better or worse or good or bad. None of that. Everyone has a script. They all have strengths. They all have weaknesses. But many of them, I would even argue most of them, are not that fit for a world in flux. So think about your script and what you've been told to do, and from the lens that, my book is focused on, when change hits, right? When change hits, we're typically told, focus on what's straight ahead, focus on what you can see, go after what's in your comfort zone, pursue what you know. And I'm looking at this going like, no, I think actually that perspective is what gets us in a lot of trouble often. That learning how, when change hits or the future seems blurry or uncertain, rather than focusing on what's straight in front of you, we need to be focusing on what's invisible writ large, what's on the periphery, what we've been trained, oftentimes unintentionally, but sometimes very overtly, to not see. And here we can talk about, there's so many different riffs on this. I love it. There's invisible value. There's invisible talent. Today, I think we focus a lot on who's at the table. I'm always looking at who's not at the table, whose voices are not being heard right now. That is what's invisible. But what's interesting is each and every one of us, and again, I'm exhibit A. This was me for most of my life too, but always again, trying to peel back the layer of that onion of what don't I know? What am I not seeing? That I think, many of us were taught to see certain things, but also to not see them. And that includes what we're told that we're never going to be enough. We're told that we're never going to have enough or earn enough, or, our career needs to be a straight path. I mean, the list goes on and on. And when you start realizing, wow, it's not that I don't want these things. It's not that I don't care about them. It's not that I don't think they're valuable. I was told that they just don't matter. And what we're finding is that the things that are invisible, and here, we can put everything from, a favorite of mine is trust. Trust will get you farther to navigate change than anything else, but it's kind of invisible, and largely because we don't put it in dollars and cents. So again, many of us have been trained to see value only when we can put a monetary value on it. We don't see the innate value of humanity, for example. So let me pause there. I mean, this gets really deep, really fast, but that's what we're looking at.
So, having been a therapist and knowing about unconscious bias, so much that motivates us is unconscious. So what you're kind of saying is bring the unconscious to consciousness. Like, I want to give a very quick example, and I'm being really transparent. I've spent so much time working with women who've been discriminated against, and I am a feminist, which means equal rights for all. That's what I mean by that. But I realize there's been so much of focus on that I'm missing so much of how men have been discriminated against and hurt by the patriarchal world. And now that my eyes have been opened, thanks to this podcast and reading so much, all of a sudden I'm seeing so much of the other side. But if you asked me a year ago, 5 years ago, what are you missing? I don't think I could tell you that. So how do we move forward fast, how do we bring the unconscious to consciousness?
Yeah, I love this. Oh my goodness, Kathy. I want to add, it relates directly to what you're talking about. It's not a silver bullet kind of answer.
Yeah.
But one of the things that comes up again and again for me is that actually we think about privilege as a really good, privilege gives you more options, privilege. And keep in mind, lots of different kinds of privilege.
Right.
People can be privileged financially. The privilege of growing up in an emotionally healthy household is enormous privilege, right? We can look at privilege of age or wisdom. I mean, many different metrics there. And privilege it should be, appreciated for all that it is. But what I'm seeing again and again is that privilege actually blinds us.
Yeah.
Privilege keeps us from seeing what could actually help us the most. And here in the context of change as well, those people who are most privileged under the current system, however you want to define that system, right, are the ones who perceive that they have the most to lose from that system changing. Yeah. So change hits, and they're the ones who go into fear and anxiety and no, you can't do this. Yet, if they could actually let down their guard a little bit, see, their privilege is keeping them from seeing some things that could be really helpful to them. When you can do that, it's actually really empowering.
Wow.
And so I bring this up because it does show up in certain gender dynamics. It shows up in how you build your career. It shows up in the value you place in money versus other kinds of social capital and otherwise, it shows up in a lot of places. But I like to tee up too, though, the many different kinds of privilege. So one easy step that I think most people can take, because even if you don't see yourself as privileged on certain metrics, I can guarantee you that every person on the planet has certain kinds of privilege that keep us alive, but also, may feel discriminated against, whatever. Get clear on what your privileges are and what that's keeping you from seeing.
Oh my gosh, I love it. And I want to do the flip and see if this resonates with you. I won't go into this because people are going to go, oh, she's so woo-woo, but I'm reading a book, Journey of Souls, about life between lives. There you go, people. But I read something and literally stopped in my tracks that the reason we incarnate or come to this planet, and if you believe in many times, I do, it is to address and resolve your fears. Fear. And I think another way to look at this, tell me if maybe it's not in your book, but tell me, I think if I spent a day, a year, 10 years thinking about what am I most afraid of? I mean, it would fill journals. What am I most afraid of losing? It would be reputation. It would be love. It would go on and on and on and on. Yeah. Could it also be a way of showing what we're not seeing?
Absolutely. What you've actually just cued for me, though, is another superpower. It's the last one.
What is it? And we need to know
around.
The 8. Oh my gosh.
Well, yeah, and we can go through the 8, but this one is about our relationship to control, and the superpower is let go of the future. And a lot of people go, wait a minute, you're a futurist, you can't say that. What are you saying? And to be clear, when I say we need to learn how to let go of the future, I am not saying give up. I am not saying failure. I'm not saying, throw in the white towel and doomsday. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying we are so caught up in needing to control the future as we want it to play out that we actually miss all the different possible futures that may exactly play out and how you might contribute to one of those. So riffing a little bit here, but I want to come back because this fear, and fear in particular of change, it is at the heart of Flux. And I tee it up. I mean, what's lovely is that change is messy. It's complicated. Like humans love certain kinds of changes typically that we opt into. The kinds of changes that we resist, they unravel us, we really, they just make us crazy, are typically those changes we can't control.
That are foisted on us often.
Yeah.
Right?
Or losing my parents, blindsided, right? It was definitely forced upon me, but it wasn't the same. There's a different kind of change that's forced upon you, like you're going to do X, Y, Z in your job. Right. But it's those changes that blindside you. It's those changes that go against your expectations. They challenge your script. They're the kinds of things that your plans aren't going to work out like you wanted them to. And so that's where I come back. And it's this through thread of the book, which is when change happens, particularly changes that are unexpected, unwelcome, you didn't want them, you're inclined to fear them or feel anxious about them or resist them. How do you right then and there flip the switch, flip the script, and turn that challenge or the worst thing that could possibly happen because of that change into the best thing that could possibly happen? Because again, it happens every time. There's an opportunity we're faced with multiple times every day to put this to use in small ways, but then also for life in bigger ways. So you've really hit on something, and it is this fear and anxiety. And, you know, I think I love that you're a therapist, that you have that background. And what's interesting is, yeah, I'm a certified yoga teacher, but I'm a lawyer and an investor. And what I'm doing is bridging these worlds. I love that you bring up these different ways of seeing ourselves, one another, because I'm trying to kind of translate those conversations as well. And we need more of that journeying kind of language that you were describing to show up in more places.
I love it. And I'm aware of our time, but I do want to talk about organizational mindset. But before I do, I feel so, I guess the word is excited when I speak to an expert like you who is, you know, in a very different world professionally, but yet we're saying much of the same thing. And here's what I mean. I now know when a crisis happens, instead of what happened, you know, after I lost my job after 9/11 and I was crushed beyond belief and, you know, almost lost our house, blah, blah, blah. Now I say, maybe not that minute, but soon I say, I'm going to look at this as, okay, it's not the worst thing that ever happened. What could happen to me that in 5 years I could look back? Or what could I create that in 5 years I look back and say, that is the best thing that ever happened to me? And a lot of people say, oh, what a bunch of nonsense. And I think it's because they're talking kind of about their human aspect, that script got blown up. And I think we're asking that you take a different approach from that you realize that, you know, what do they say? Man plans, God laughs. I mean, that the idea that you had, that it had to look like that it had to be that, is really just our small mind trying to be in control.
Yeah. What we're after, it's not actual control. It's just the illusion of it.
It's so right. It's so true. Right? All right. Anyway. Now can we talk about organizational,
absolutely
a flux in an organization? What do we as managers, leaders, what do we need to do differently here?
Yeah. So I think at the very basic sort of starting point is to keep in mind that organizations are groups of individuals, right? Now, fast forward a little bit. I firmly believe that a flux mindset at the organizational level, it is going to become an essential element of thriving organizational cultures in a world in flux. We're not there yet, so there's a lot of work to do, but it begins by, so what we're trying to do with the book on a one-on-one level, you know, is really help you understand what is your relationship to change? How does it need to improve? And here are the superpowers, the sort of how to strengthen the muscles that you need to thrive in a world in flux. So you start there, but already it's lovely. I'm thrilled with how organizations are already taking up the book and saying, whoa, this has everything to do with teamwork and collaboration and how we show up for one another and how we think about how the organization will thrive in a world in flux. But it does tend to boil down to or come back to, how do individual members of our team, like, do we actually understand one another's relationships to change? Because what I love is back to the whole change is messy and complicated. Like a change that's easy for me may be really hard for you. A change that's really easy for you might be really hard for me. You might love a kind of change that I absolutely detest or resist or feel very anxious about, and vice versa. And what's interesting is organizations today, they focus so much on change management. And that's what I've heard a lot. Oh, you wrote a book about change management. I'm like, no, I did not. With all due respect to change management, which is helpful for strategy and so forth, it's incomplete, absolutely incomplete, because mindset drives strategy, not the other way around. And so rarely do we take the time to understand our relationships to change, much less our colleagues, yet we're all showing up, you know, I could say figuratively to the table or to the Zoom room, right, with baggage around change. certain things delight us, certain things trigger us. We don't actually know what does for ourselves or for one another. And so you sort of want to level set there. And then it turns into, though, not just how to improve your organizational culture, but we're really looking at, these are skills for you professionally, personally. This is for you, not just in the office or at work, but in your family, with your friendships, and all the way, all through life, because there is a kind of life cycle of change as well.
So in a way, can you answer this for me? And again, not to cast aspersion on change management. It's a whole discipline, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
But when I hear it compared to the spirit of what you're talking about, change management is trying to manage, control, shape it.
Precisely.
We forget it.
Precisely. Well, and I say this because I ended up writing the book because I was seeing as a futurist, where I'm invited into organizations to help them, forecast the future, plan their strategy around it. And that's why I have immense respect for it as a discipline, just like I have immense respect for VUCA, right? Volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. Absolutely. But I'm looking at these systems, these mechanisms of thought and processes and so forth. And I'm going, where's the human element? Where is our humanity? It's incomplete. So again, really clear, these are helpful tools, but they're insufficient. And when change hits, that's when the really human, again, the fears, the anxieties, those get churned up at that time. And if you haven't dealt with them already, then, or integrated them in some way, you're going to be in a world of hurt, and your change management book, plan, manual, whatever, throw it
Get
out.
it.
Yeah. So
I have to ask you one more question, then I've got to let you go. I'm doubting other people might ask you this a lot, but I'm fascinated on how we become a futurist. What is it that you study? What is it that allows you to come into an organization and speak for hundreds of CEOs about the future? What is it that you have to study and talk about to be a futurist? Can I ask you?
Oh, I love this question. Absolutely. Because my answer, it's quite interesting that 10 years ago, this term barely existed. And today you can get a master's in futures thinking.
You can?
There are lots of, they're not common, but they do exist at select universities. Yeah. And it's really what it's teaching you how to do is how to, for example, forecast. Or another tool, and we talk about this in the book, what does it mean to scenario plan or scenario map? And this, again, shows up in chapter 8, Let Go of the Future, rather than trying to control and predict and I'm going to know the future. And if that future doesn't go our way, we don't know what we're going to do. You're mapping out a bunch of different scenarios, future scenarios that could happen. Now, the lovely thing is, very rarely, if ever, do any of these scenarios play out exactly as you'd forecast them. But usually what happens is some aspect of them, of various scenarios, comes to play. And you're like, oh, we thought about what if that happened? We thought about if that happened. And you're weaving this fabric together. But the nice thing is, because none of this is hitting you out of left field, you've thought about these things before. Right. You may not have everything in place, but you're a little bit more prepared. So in my case, what's interesting, it became over time other people really calling me a futurist, where they were like, you're seeing where we're going as a society far before most people. And, we need to follow what you're doing more. So I've done a lot of work with Institute for the Future, IFTF, which is a wonderful think tank based in the Bay Area. But for me, it does go back. I would not be able to be a futurist like I am right now, if I had done a kind of singular career path, if I had just done, let's say, marketing or just done tourism sector, whatever. It was because I was cross-pollinating. But as I was cross-pollinating and leveraging skills in very different and unique ways, that all of a sudden, every day I was getting a new kind of expertise, a new kind of wisdom. And then I was able to kind of transfer back and connect the dots back, sort of reverse engineer, if you will, what was going on. And it does, so it requires a certain amount of deliberation and discipline to develop this kind of career. There are many more tools now available than there were when I started out doing this.
I love it.
But I like to say we do need people thinking, well, actually, this is just a fun footnote. I tend to look, when I'm working on futurist related engagements, perhaps 5 or 10 years out. 20 is getting already pretty tough for me personally, because, that's a generation and so many things might change between now and then.
Right.
There are futurists though, who are also doing the 50 to 100 years out.
Oh,
that's super. So you can even specialize within futurism.
I want to study from them.
Which is,
here's my final question.
Mm-hmm.
When you go into organizations to help them see the future, okay, how do I ask this? Do they have the answers to those questions and you're just asking different questions?
I love that you ask this. I actually have two answers to that.
Oh.
So one, and they both relate to the superpowers as well. So one is that, in fact, and what a lot of organizations have told me over the years is they're like, you're busy thinking about all those things that we kind of sense are important. We've like heard they're important, but we're too busy with the day-to-day, just keeping the trains running on time. We don't know where to look. We don't know what those are. We need you as a kind of insider outsider, right?
I see.
So I can also say kind of, but on the flip side, the more essential message, I think, is that when it comes to improving our relationships to change and being able to let go of the future and being able to strengthen our Flux superpowers, for each and every one of those, I can say unequivocally, we have what we need to do this inside ourselves right now. We do not need technology that we don't have. We don't need money that we may or may not have. Everything we need to actually create, develop, open a Flux mindset, it's fundamental human wisdom. So this sense of coming full circle, or this sense of what we've always known, we've had this wisdom forever, but what's happened is over the past several decades and a few centuries, I might add, is that we've kind of buried them. We've buried them. Society's given us, again, this script. And when society gives you the script, they're like, just forget about what your inner voice might be telling you. And I'm saying we need to unearth and unleash that inner voice, that inner wisdom, and write a new script, again, that's fit for a world in flux.
It's so beautiful. I mean, to me, it's spiritual, not religious, spiritual. But I would say that what we also need is the space to focus on this. Mm-hmm. I mean, do we need a futurist in every major organization, a person? My system is binging and binging. I'm sorry, people, if you're hearing a beat. Do we need that? Do we need creating the priority and the space to think this way?
Oh my goodness. I feel like you're reading inside my mind. I just finished an op-ed on this kind of thing, which is not, there are a few organizations that actually do have in-house futurists, large organizations that are like Intel. I know that Intel, they have, and not, it's sort of futurist anthropologist, really interesting role, but it's not that everyone would need one full time. I think every organization needs to get much better at not trying to do strategic planning, but trying to do scenarios forecasting. I think, and I love what you're talking about too, this sense, and, hopefully, well, we touched upon it in different ways, this sense of whatever we're going to do in the outside world comes from who we are on the inside. So this sort of professional development through personal growth. We have to think about this inside out. And so I think that's the kind of thinking, that's the kind of vision that every organization needs to have. And that needs to be messaged, I think, from, leadership and all the way out and all the way down and all the way, all the directions. And to have a role, I think about it a lot in terms of organizations have a chief change officer often, or not often, some do, but when they do have a chief change officer, it's typically the person tasked with handling digital transformation. And I'm like, no, we need a chief change navigator that is much more about the human experience of change, that is nested within or amongst different functions in an organization.
Oh, April, it's so, I could keep you for 10 hours, and I know you have another interview coming where my head is exploding. I know it's going to change what I do. I know it is, and how I think and how I help others. But where do we learn more about you, where do we go? Where do we get the book? Where do we hire you to speak? Where do we get where do we go?
Thank you so much. So if you want to learn more about Flux and all things Flux and the book, the website is fluxmindset.com.
That's easy.
So lots to learn there. And I've tried to make a lot of the information just easy to digest and publicly available right there. And then if you want to know more about me and, my background and that sort of thing, it's aprilrinne.com. So just my name.
All right. I'm so grateful. What, I speak to a lot of people, but I know that I've had a lot of change happening because I have to go take a nap. That's how it feels. Like there's a lot going on that is shifting things. And I'm so grateful to you. Thank you for coming on. Thank grateful.
You so much, Kathy. My pleasure.
I know your book is going to be a smashing success. People, we want to hear from you wherever you see this, Instagram, TikTok, wherever it is, LinkedIn. What we want to know is, how is this hitting you? What do you have questions on? How is it shaking you up? Where do you have to go take a nap? Please let us know, because that's how we understand if we're delivering any value here. And also we want to help. So please, wherever you see this, give us a comment. We'd love to hear. And I hope you're inspired to understand what change is and embrace it, and and do a lot of things like address, let go. Have a wonderful week. Thank you again, April, and we will see you next time. Bye. Thanks so much for joining us today. And please don't forget to check out findingbrave.org for more programs, resources, and tips. And tune in next time for your weekly dose of Finding Brave.